morning, everybody. Hey, thank you. Keith Brooks from the Education Department, is a part of the Faculty Development Team. Welcome to Primetime Library. This is the last presentation for the 2011-2012 Primetime season, and it's been a great year of collaboration between the Friends of the BU Library and many different offices on campus, whose mission is to encourage lifelong learning beyond the classroom for the entire Bethel community. If you've missed some of the presentations this year or want to see one again, you can pick up a Primetime card. I believe I saw some back there on the table. Yeah, it has the URL where you can go and check out some of the past sessions. Today we are celebrating the publication of It's Milking Time, a children's book by Dr. Phyllis Alsdurf of the English Department. Let's welcome her as she shares the journey to publication.
Hello. Ooh, I'm projecting. I started this with a title which sounds rather negative and just kind of depressing, especially for some of you young folks who think, I don't want to wait 20 years to get something published. Well, I'd be old. I beg to differ. I don't feel old, but I did want to be honest, because the very first question that I get asked about this book is, how long did it take you to write it? And I've been asked that about 5 or 6 times now. And it's sort of an impossible question to answer, because really, if I trace this book back, it probably is 40 years old, but I could really find the genesis of it about 20 years ago. So how long did it take me to write it? Probably my entire lifetime. And I guess I would say my advice would be for people who have a children's book within them is to have patience, lots of patience, because really through the course of years, the seed of an idea might be within you already. Some of you, I bet, have an idea for a book, and you, maybe several. And you're thinking, as soon as I graduate, I'm going to get this thing published. But it might need time to be planted and sprout a little bit, and then the cold winds of reality blow in, and it dies off. And it reemerges in a different form, perhaps really a better form, something that's really richer, truer, and better in the long run. So the question of how long does it take to write a children's book, I would say, well, 20 minutes or 20 years, kind of take your pick. Because this book, I actually wrote it down in about 20 minutes, but then it sat around for almost 20 years before it saw publication. And the process of writing and developing a book is a really complex one. It takes a long time for a worthy idea to emerge out of many good ideas, and then for that idea to be narrowed down, to be polished, and done so in a way that, at least theoretically, you want it to be elegant, concise, and also complex, because a good children's book needs to have messages on a couple different levels at least. Something that appeals to children, obviously, but then to the people who are buying the book, grandparents, parents. And then you have to do it almost always in 32 pages and probably less than 1,000 words, so that complicates the issue too. So you have to keep refining it and rewriting it. So where do you get your ideas? This is going to be so corny all the way. That's the joy of children's book. I was saying to someone right before this, it's so fun to be in a children's book arena, because it's not like academia. No one's trying to impress anybody else, because most of the time you're reading to kids, and they're just so forthright, and I love that about it. It really has been totally enjoyable. Not that academia isn't fun, but so I like to think of working and reworking a thought or an image to chewing your cud. How many of you have seen a cow chew its cud?
Amen.
Yeah, and the cud gets chewed and chewed and chewed and chewed until it's ready to be digested, and it takes a long time for that to happen. because sometimes the story you think you have isn't the story that really does emerge. Picture books are considered sort of the crown jewel of publishing, and despite the ebb and flow of the publishing world, picture books still are surviving, lots of changes happening. You know, will they all turn to ebooks? The jury's still out, but people that I hear from say not likely. It's hard to have someone sit in your lap, you know, with a Kindle, and it doesn't feel the same, you know. Now, this book, if it was an ebook, we could have mooing every now and then, but I don't think that would enhance it really that much. So, you know, getting a picture book published it's still considered by many people kind of it brings together sort of poetry and the beauty of illustration. So it's a wonderful thing to happen, but it's not for the faint of heart. I just wanted to note a little bit of background about picture books. There's a new book out about picture books, and I'm using picture book as one word because that's the format used in this book by Martin Salisbury. It's wonderful. It's a beautifully illustrated book about picture books. And he says that classic picture books succeed because the simple visual style allows readers to project their own personalities and thoughts onto the characters. These books inform as they entertain, but they also contain an element of surprise, and they engage the imagination. I just heard this morning that Marie Sendek died at age 83. Now there's a picture book creator. He illustrated, if I recall what I heard on NPR, I think it was like 80-some books and authored and illustrated 20 of his own. And he is really seen as pivotal in the history of children's picture books, because Where the Wild Things Are deals with anger in children, which was really something unusual at the time. So we want to remember him and his ability to engage the imagination, to surprise, to entertain, and inform us all at once. This quote from Salisbury says, "The very best picture books become timeless mini art galleries for the home, a coming together of concept, artwork, design, and production that gives pleasure to and stimulates the imagination of both children and adults." And it's not like I'm saying my humble offering is one of these timeless books, but that's what you hold up in your mind as you're working on a children's book, is the ability to bring together both an idea and then the illustrations, usually that someone else is doing, to stimulate the imagination. The father of picture books is Ralph Caldecott, for whom the Caldecott Awards were named. And some of you may recognize from old books some of these, the types of illustrations that he used. And he really, it was, before him, there really weren't, on any grand scale, books with illustrations. I love this little quote from G.K. Chesterton that was inscribed in the Caldecott book. "This is the sort of book we like, for you and I are very small, with pictures stuck in anywhere and hardly any words at all." What a fun idea. So, and it goes on. That's just kind of the beginning of his inscription in that book. So the genesis for my book comes from the beauty and tedium, or maybe I should say the tedium and beauty, of the real thing, which is milking. And these are pictures of my dad. They're pretty grainy, but my dad, probably from the 60s, milking in the milk parlor outside the barn, feeding some milk to the cats, probably, the dog there, and then carrying the milking pail in the barn after he's milked cows. And it was something that happened every morning, every night. It's milking time. And if you've looked at the book, that's a refrain that's repeated throughout. So I didn't want to romanticize milking time, but it really was something that really formed me as a person, I think. When you grow up in a dairy farm, you grow up in a dairy farm. You don't move, you don't go anywhere. I was just saying to Ann that my parents usually got away for one weekend a year. Maybe in a really good year, 4 or 5 days. And I mean, that happened all the time. We didn't feel sorry for ourselves. And if we were lucky, we got to go too. And that was usually to a lake up north to go fishing. And you just didn't leave a farm. You had to be there. Now, life has changed in the farm. And this book really depicts farming kind of in the 50s, 60s era. But many things haven't changed because farmers still are very much wedded to the land. Milking is a mundane, twice-a-day routine, and it forms sort of a monotonous but also very comforting routine around which everything else in life gets built. You might have tons of work to do in the field. There could be a huge rainstorm coming in. You've got to get hay in the barn. You've got all kinds of stuff to do. But you can't leave the cows. They can't go unmilked. I mean, you've got to milk the cows. If you're not going to do it, somebody else has to do it. So that is a reality that really formed me as a person. Another inspiration for the book is this interesting looking lad here on the side. That's my brother. And this picture was one that was familiar to me growing up. We didn't really, we weren't like some of you younger folks nowadays. Everybody has these gleaming smiles and you have like photos everywhere. We didn't really have that. Maybe a high school picture or something. But this was one picture we did have on the wall, and I found this copy in my great aunt's scrapbook. She was sort of the family historian. And she had typed in the words from John Greenleaf Whittier, "Blessings on thee, little man, barefoot boy with cheek of tan, with thy turned up pantaloons and thy merry whistle tunes." That was my brother Richard. And he was, and actually, even as an adult, is sort of a wild child. I mean, truth be told. This is the kid who discovered dynamite on the farm and promptly blew it up. Yes, he did. He still has copper in his face from that incident. He got run over by a culipactor, which is an antiquated machine, but it's a big round thing. But fortunately, the soil was really soft and he fell in face first. And so, my dad ran over him and was just distraught, and Richard jumped up, and there he was. He would make these, he was a wonderful older brother to have. He would make complex forts in the haymow that were so complex that we as the little kids would get lost. I'm sure we could suffocate today, and I'm sure OSHA doesn't even allow it to happen. But we had so much fun in the haymow with him because we would always be on the same team, but we were fighting the enemy out there. And so that's how we functioned. He would make these complicated box kites, and he rigged up an old bicycle wheel, and he had the string of the kite on the wheel, and we almost lost him to a lightning storm once when he had a box kite way up high, and there was lightning in the sky, but fortunately he survived. So this is a picture I always think of. He also ran around barefoot all summer long and was tough as nails. And this is how he dressed. It was before designer labels. We didn't even know such a thing would exist. And we felt, we didn't feel like we were poor, there was anything wrong. This is kind of how we lived, just very basic. And whenever it was time for milking, Richard ran down the lane to get the cows. Now, when he got older, he moved on to other chores, and then my sisters and I had that opportunity ourselves. So I had this image of Richard that I carried around in my mind for a long, long time, and didn't really know what to do with it. In addition to that, this is the farm where I grew up, part of it. I grew up with a family of storytellers. Storytelling, it wasn't intentional, that's what we did. My probably the best storyteller in the family was my Uncle Milo, who lived in Oklahoma City, and he would come north every summer for a week at a cabin, and if we were lucky, we would go for the weekend. And he had his wife, Moval, and he drove a pink Lincoln Continental with suicide doors, and he had a pinky ring. I mean, this was like so alien to us. We were just like, and of course, we were the country bumpkins, but Milo could tell stories about growing up on the Iron Range and poverty, or what, well, I mean, he actually used an axe accidentally and cut the tips off my dad's fingers. I mean, there were just like all kinds of things that happened. And he would tell these stories, and we would just be in the palm of his hand. I mean, they usually ended with some spiritual message at the end. And he was known to recite whole poems and his prayers. And so we just grew up with these storytellers. And then we had a couple uncles from the cities. And of course, you know how sophisticated the cities is. Well, and they, get this, they worked at the Ford plant. Well, I mean, that was like, we were total buffoons compared to our uncles. When they came down for all the holidays, it was always held at our house, and they would tell us how the world really ran, you know, what people were really like, and the crime and the gritty realities. And so I just grew up with these stories all the time, and we learned to tell stories to each other. The sad reality is, we did not have a television. I am here, you can touch me. I grew up without a television. We had a radio, and we got the paper a day late because of the rural delivery. But we never felt like we were out of it. We read voraciously, and people told stories. And I know this sounds like I'm 100 years old. It wasn't that long ago. It was just, and of course, no computers, none of those good things. So we read, we listened, we watched, lots of long walks. And yes, here's me at the Big Rock. This is the lane where the cows would come up with, the Big Rock is in the lane. And that was during probably, I don't know, maybe college, I don't know. But you learn to nurture solitude in a way in an environment like this. And as you do so, you have enough time for ideas to kind of float by, and maybe one lands and you capture it and you hang on to it. So let's get back to reality. How did I actually start this process of writing this children's book? It actually was a deflection from my 3 lovely children, who I do love, but at one point in my life, I didn't know if I could handle them any longer. So instead, I started a doctoral program, which is really crazy. But and I had this sort of slender idea floating around in my head, which took initial shape in 1993. I started a graduate program, and then I heard about a children's book writing seminar that the University of Minnesota's Split Rock writing program was offering with Jane Yolen of Al Moon fame. And they had a lottery, and I won one of the 12 slots. And so I got to go up north to, attend this seminar, which was wonderful. And while I was there, I worked on a bunch of things, and one of them was this story, which I did write in about 15 minutes, the first version of it. And, got workshopped while I was there and got some feedback. About 5 years later, I pulled it out of the archives of my basement and fiddled around with it a little bit more, and on a whim decided to send it to a Writer's Digest children's book writing contest. And there were 895 entries that year, and it won first place. And so I was like, wow, that's really cool. You know what I discovered in my files? I didn't even cash in the receipt that I got for free books from Writer's Digest. I was living in such a, you can't even imagine it. It's like kids, graduate school, whatever. So this is like something that happened, but I didn't know how to market this book. And I sent it to 2 or 3 publishers, got letters back, but nothing happened. So then it died. It went into my files for a decade, literally, a whole 10 years. And you know, I mean, I knew it was there, but so what? The world is so full of good ideas, and who knows. But then in 2009, my daughter lived in New York City, and she was having coffee with a friend of a friend. This friend of a friend is named Jonathan, and he was kind of a low-level editor at Random House, and he said he was editing children's books. And she said, oh, my mom has written some children's books, because I have a number of manuscripts I've worked on, and they said, oh, she should send me something. Well, that afternoon, thanks to email, I emailed Jonathan this manuscript, and he really liked it and, you know, kind of passed it around, but then he got laid off. But the manuscript lay there, and Beth picked it up. Beth really liked it, and she passed it around, and then she decided to go live on a farm. So she left Random House, but she left it with Chelsea, and Chelsea's still at Random House. Chelsea also liked it and worked with me in the process of getting this ready to present to their editorial team. And eventually, I think it was in 2010, they finally got a contract for getting this published. So, I mean, you can see it's like, I'm not normative, but I've been to a National Writers Conference where one of the award winners, you know, lots of national fame. It took him 10 years to get one of his books published. So it's not uncommon for this sort of thing to happen. Even if it's something that maybe someday will be, you know, will sell well, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to get the notice that you think you deserve. And part of the issue is there are so many people who are writing children's books. Go to one of these conferences. The one I went to, there were 3,000 people there, okay? And you're competing with everybody else with your little manuscript. And it's kind of like a catch-22. Publishing companies, almost 99% of them will not take unsolicited manuscripts, meaning they'll only take something if they want you to send it to them. How do they figure out what they want you to send? Oh, you have to have an agent, and an agent comes to them, and they'll talk to the agent. Well, how do you get an agent? Well, you have to have something published first. So it's like this round robin. How do you break in? Which is why people go to writers' conferences, because there's a little loophole, and I'm telling you a secret. You go to these writers' conferences, you pay your money, get in. And if you go to these workshops, they'll have editors from different companies, and they'll do a workshop, and then at the end they'll say, for the next 6 weeks, I will take unsolicited manuscripts if they have this little symbol in the, you know, on the front of the envelope. So, you know, with hundreds and thousands of other people who are there, you're like, quickly get your stuff in the mail, and maybe, you know, it's like, maybe it will see the light of day. So it really is kind of a miracle or a mystery, you know, whichever way you want to look at it. I do want to say something about the melding of words and pictures. When you write a picture book, generally a publisher does not want to see illustrations with the words, unless you're a Maurice Sendak or a, you know, very well-established author. They want to pick the illustrator. In this case, they were Random House editors were great, partly because I think they didn't know anything about farming. So I wrote an exotic guide to the mystical world of Midwestern farming, and I sent all these pictures about what a barn is like, and what a farmhouse is like. You know, I felt like I just landed from Mars, you know, and they thought it was wonderful, you know. But they let me kind of weigh in on choosing an illustrator, and it's very interesting how this occurred, because the editor, I mean, there are thousands of illustrators just like writers, and so the editors gave me a list of several people and to look at their websites, and I really liked the work of Steve Johnson and Lou Fancher, who live in California, and my editor really loved them too. That was their first pick, and both of us liked this certain book of theirs, Salamander Room, and it was like, oh great, yeah, let's go for this. Well, so the Johnson-Fancher team did take the book and are the illustrators. Come to find out, they're originally from White Bear Lake, and Steve plays golf with Jeff Swanson every summer when he comes back here, and they have relatives who've gone to Bethel. So I just thought that was very unusual. maybe miraculous. I don't know. But they did just a wonderful job, and it's the illustrations are really great. So they really get lots of the credit. Also, half the royalties. So we'll talk about that later if you want. So after almost 20 years, this idea that was floating around in my head and landed on my shoulder kind of like a butterfly took on a life of its own and flew off and became a book. And I hope that it is a book that you can really get into. And when I say that, I'm thinking of, this was just on NPR, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. A guy, Bob Krulwich, who I don't know, told a story about a little boy who was given a picture book. He was about 4 or 5 years old. And he opened it up, wouldn't look up, turned the pages, looked through all the pages of the picture book, kept turning and turning. And when he was finished, he did an odd thing. He laid the book down, opened it wide, and stood on it, 1 foot planted on each page. And his mom said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I want to get inside. How do I get inside?" So this is how David Small, the author of Stitches, illustrated that story. We all would love to write a book that people can get inside one way or another. If that happens, that's wonderful. I don't know that will happen with this book, but that's my deep desire. Some books really are that good that the reader just wants to get inside and inhabit the world of that book. Many people, and I know some of you here have picture books in your heads, wonderful books in the making that you really want to bring into the world. And the only bit of advice I would give you is don't give up. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. This may be taking scripture totally out of context, but I hang on to that idea of waiting and persevering, not giving up. And kind of with humility, I think cows are good role models for us. If you read the book, you'll know that the cows travel on the same well-worn path in the grass. They do. If they come up from the pasture, and they always walk in the same path. And in this book, the father and daughter also walk in the same path up to the house, which is what we did at least. So like a dairy cow who trudges on the same well-worn pathway every morning, every night, don't give up, keep persevering, and maybe you'll have a book that somebody will want to just get into. Thank you. So, any questions? I know you want to know how much money I made. Okay, I'll tell you. 80 cents. So I'm going to get rich quick. I'm not quitting my day job here. Okay. I mean, I was just at a reading event with Nancy Carlson, and we were both celebrity authors, which was about as, that's like the biggest honor I've had. Nancy Carlson, of like the Harriet books. I mean, she's an illustrator, writer, and it's a dismal trade in many ways. It's hard to make a go of it if that's what you're doing full time. She does lots of speaking around the country to supplement royalties, because you just don't make that much money.
So what would be considered big sales for a hardcover?
I've tried to get that out of my publisher. I think the first print run they've done is like 5,000, which isn't much. But now with printing technologies, they can print on demand, so they don't like to warehouse books that much. So I really don't know. And unless you're like a really big name person, you're not going to get lots of money spent on you for promotion. Getting with a company like Random House is really a great thing to happen, because they do, like they have all these connections, and they've sent out 200 review copies to people across the country, and they're arranging a few events. But, you know, when I, you know, travel hither and yon, I'll carry my backpack full of books and go from, you know, when I, you know, go to little towns, I'll be like Johnny Appleseed. You know, I mean, that's kind of what you do as a book author. You're your own PR person.
Any movie contracts yet?
No, but you'll be gratified to know I do have a website, which for somebody who didn't even have a television, that's like, like landing on the moon, sort of. So I'm trying to get with the program.
Did you ever consider using photos instead of having illustrated?
Well, you know, it wasn't really my call, and they, you know, they decided that. The other thing they decided was the title of the book, because I called it Milking Time. And I felt like that was a little more poetic, and I liked that better. But they, I mean, this was like a big meeting. Could we put an "it's" in front of Milking Time? Well, you know, I've been a teacher too long. I've brutalized many of your papers, and it's like, okay, it's my turn. Yeah, make it "it's Milking Time." I still like Milking Time a little bit better, but they like the action of that. So the photos or the illustrations, all of that they decide. And they're very, very careful. We spent months going over every word. Should it be a "the" or an "a"? Should this be a capital letter? Do we want a dash or a comma? You know, really, really careful consideration of it. And partly because in a children's book, every word, it's like part of the art and the layout of it. You know, they have to first figure out how many spreads, where the words are going to go on the spreads, and they got rid of a couple words. I mean, gurgling became gurgles, which I can live with. But they got rid of gamble, which I really think accurately describes the way calves are when they come out of the pen. But
that's B-O-L or B-L-A?
O-L. Gamble. And that was after the school librarians read it, and the librarians and teachers, and they felt like it was going to be too confusing for kids. So I didn't want to dumb it down for kids. I think it's a good way for them to learn different words. But I didn't fight for that. At that point, it's kind of like, you know, I want to be a good team player. So anyway. Any other questions?
Could you read this to us?
Oh, yeah, I guess I could. I don't know, do we have time?
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to. This is cool, isn't it? This is like the fur of a cow, no, the coat of a cow, you know. So, and this is dedicated to my father, Lloyd Andrew Gibbs, and JJ, one of the much-loved Holsteins on our Minnesota farm. We really had one cow who was named JJ, and my dad used to ride her, and we loved her. And it was a very sad day when the rendering truck came and got JJ. Every morning, every night, it's milking time. I slip under barbed wire and race down the lane fast. I'm late. Dad's waiting on me to start milking. "Come, boss," I holler, "come, boss." There by a stand of poplars, a huddle of black and white starts to move. JJ, as usual, leads the Holstein parade. This is a great angle. Single file they come on the same worn path. "Come, boss, it's milking time." I really did yell for the cows like that, "Come, boss." And it was so fun in writing this to discover that "combos" is from the Latin, and it's a derivation of a Latin term meaning bovine. So farmers aren't stupid, so don't underestimate them. Cuds a chewing, tails a swatting, hooves a pounding, into the barnyard they trudge. I close the gate and head to the barn, where Dad piles grain in front of each stall. I scoop soybean meal on top and set up the milkers. Together we lay down a bed of fresh straw. Outside, the cows bellow and snort. "Ready," Dad says, and I open the barn door. I mean, there's lots of nice little detail they put in. Impatient and hungry, the cows heave themselves into the barn. Their hooves clack across the cement floor. We swap rumps to keep them moving, to the same places every time. I lock each cow in her stanchion. Dad washes off teats. A is for Alfie, always first, to be hooked up to the milker. A leather strap across her back holds it in place. Every morning, every night, it's milking time. I lean against a dusty windowsill and see sunlight setting on a field of corn. Dad's arm rests on my shoulders. Sure could use some rain, he says. The air is hot, heavy. Overhead, a fan whirs. Tails swishing, the cows chomp and chew their cud. Dad turns on the radio low, so we can hear the weather report, or maybe the ball game. And across the farm field, even today, on a summer night, you will hear the Minnesota Twins. There are more fans out there in the field. And you can hear it across, it's projected. Cows like the Twins for some reason. I hear the slurp of suction. Alfie's done. Time for Bertha, I yell to Dad. Alfie, Bertha, Cassie, Di, an alphabet of cows to milk. Each time a milker fills, Dad empties it into a pail that he carries, arm outstretched for balance, to the milk house. So you remember that picture of my dad? That was in my mind at that point. A cascade of blue and white empties into the strainer and gurgles through to the milk can below. Dad pours some into a pitcher to take up to the house when milking time is done. Underfoot, cats lap up foamy spills. Every morning, every night, it's milking time. In a corner pen, a half dozen calves wobble awkwardly on legs spindly and weak. They bawl for attention and shove their boxy heads between worn wooden slats as they nuzzle for food. Feeding them is my job, something Dad lets me do all by myself. I fill their trough with a pyramid of grain and unravel a bale of hay. Dad hands me a pail, heavy with milk for the calves. I climb into the pen, and a small calf, with a triangle of white above his nose, bumps against me. Looks like you've got yourself a friend, Dad laughs, as he moves a milker to the next cow. The calf gives a baby moo. What do you want to name the little guy? The calf nudges my leg, and I wrap my arm around his neck. He looks up at me with liquid brown eyes. Buddy, I say. Every morning, every night, it's milking time. Soon every cow's been milked, and 2, 3, 4 cans have been filled. One by one, we unhook stanchions. Go on, girls, get out of here, says Dad. I can't do it like I used to. Tick, tick. I urge from behind, move on out to pasture. Then the barn is empty. A swallow swoops through an open window and out again. We shovel manure into gutters so the paddles of the barn cleaner can carry it to a waiting spreader. Later, it will fertilize the fields. I scrub the milkers and strainer up to my elbows in suds. Dad lifts the last milk can into the cooler. Tomorrow, they'll go to the creamery. The milk gets made into butter and cheese or poured into bottles and sold in stores and at farmers markets everywhere. This was this I added at the request of my editors. They wanted to appeal to the farmers market, kind of, I don't know, back to the earth type, whatever. So, people in places near and far use the milk on their cereal, the cheese on their sandwiches, the butter on their sweet corn. Every morning, every night, it's milking time. We fan out bales of straw, bedding for the morning when it will be milking time again. Dad opens a cooler and takes out the pitcher of milk. By now, a thick skin of cream floats on top. Unpasteurized milk, might I add, on which I grew up. No allergies, thank you, but whatever. It can kill you too, but I survived. Mom will skim the cream off for morning coffee, and I'll drink the milk, our milk, with my pancakes. As the summer sun disappears and the sky turns a dark shade of blue, Dad and I walk up to the house, single file on a path worn in the grass. For one more night, milking time is done. Every morning, every night, it's milking time. Every day of the week, every week of the month, every month of the year, it's milking time.